On July the 8th, 1974, the Canadian voters once again, for those who cared to do so, went to the polls. One of the issues was how to combat or fight against the rising inflation. This, of course, had been caused in Canada, as in most other Western industrialized countries, by the rapid, even shocking rise in the oil prices in the wake of the October 1973 Yom Kippur War between Egypt, Syria, and Israel. Because in order to retaliate for the material support that many Western countries gave to Israel during that war, the mostly Arab oil-producing countries then dramatically raised the price of oil. Robert Stanfield, the progressive conservative leader, offered wage and price controls which were based on the concept of zero growth, at least temporarily. Trudeau mockingly rejected this approach, claiming that there would be some other alternative, and mocking Stanfield by claiming that Stanfield essentially was telling inflation, "Zap, you're frozen." Privately, during the election campaign, the already rather frustrated federal finance minister, John Turner, told Trudeau that should the Liberals win the election, he would serve as federal finance minister for 1 more year. And he kept his promise, resigning in September 1975 because he was unwilling to implement those wage and price controls which Trudeau had so publicly and mockingly rejected, but which he eventually then turned to, having exhausted apparently the other credible options or alternatives. Again, Quebec helped the Liberals to win. The Progressive Conservatives were only able to get 3 seats in the province, but they also lost seats in some English-speaking provinces. The Liberal sweep of the Toronto area ridings or electoral districts caused the New Democrats to lose about half of their seats. So let's look at the results in greater detail now. Still 264 deputies were elected to the Canadian House of Commons. The turnout was sharply down to just 71%. The Liberals got 43.2% of the popular vote, or about 4,103,000 votes and 141 seats. The Progressive Conservatives ironically raised their share of the popular vote a bit to 35.5%, or 3,371,000 votes. However, they dropped to 95 seats. The New Democrats fell to 15.4% of the popular vote, or to 1,468,000 votes, and to just 16 seats. David Lewis, the party leader, humiliatingly was one of the New Democrats who lost their seats. His seat was in York South, in the Greater Toronto area. Réal Cahouette's social creditors, or créditistes in Quebec, were down sharply in the popular vote to just 5.1% of the federal total, or 481,000 seats, and dropped to 11 seats in Quebec. So Trudeau was able to form another majority government, and he, interestingly enough, called the new election, neither in 1977, when he could have called it, and then he probably would have received a massive majority because of the concerns of Canadian unity, since in November 1976 the separatist Parti Québécois had won the Quebec provincial elections, nor in 1978, when he probably would still have been able to lead the Liberals to victory. This was actually similar to the mistake that the British Prime Minister at the time, James Callaghan, made. He was also expected to call an election in 1978, which the Labourites probably would have won, but decided to wait until 1979, when he had to call the election. However, in contrast to the late Prime Minister Callaghan, the late Prime Minister Trudeau was able to return to power in 1980, while Callaghan lost the prime ministership for good in Britain. And following 3 consecutive election losses, federal election losses, Robert Stanfield announced his resignation as the Progressive Conservative leader already in the summer of 1974. However, his successor was only chosen in February 1976, and Joseph or Joe Clark of Alberta, who had first been elected to the Canadian House of Commons in 1972, became the new Progressive Conservative leader.